Hey everyone, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable for an insightful and entertaining chat about the end times. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. I am delighted to be with you. Where's my camera going? It's going some weird place. There we go. All right. Well, we have a special treat. We've got Dr. Judd Burton on, and we're going to be talking about end times hybrids, chimeras, and cryptids. So it should be a pretty fun discussion. I'm looking forward to it. Dr. Judd, or Dr. Burton, excuse me, is recovering, so you'll have to just forgive him for a little bit of being a little bit bedridden, but he's brave enough to come here and to share with us. And so I'm really looking forward to this. He's a good friend. I'm looking forward to discussing this exciting topic. If you have questions, of course, put them in the chat and we will do our best to get to those. So, hey, Judd, it's great to see you.
Hey, good to be seen, Doug.
And there's Douglas Woodward.
Hey,
welcome.
Hi, Dr. Judd.
Hey, Doug, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. So, are you involved in that fight with Ashley Judd and Winona Judd?
I am thoroughly and absolutely not involved at all.
I saw the Judds were having a big fight, and it just occurred to me that I should ask you and see if you got involved. Of course, that's a little different when it's your first name versus your last name.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I reiterate I'm absolutely in no way, shape, or form involved.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, so Judd, tell us about maybe kind of bring everybody up to speed on what's a chimera, right? What's a cryptid? That's probably something that maybe is less well known. I think probably most people know what hybrids are. There have been enough sci-fi movies to bring us up to speed on that. So yeah, kind of give us the lowdown on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, a chimera, of course, that comes from Greek mythology, the etymology of that word itself, and you're talking about a creature that's made up of multiple other creatures, bits and pieces of other creatures. And a cryptid is just modern parlance for animals that may that are sort of outside of the conventional taxonomy of animals that we have recorded. So things like Dogman or Sasquatch, or even a number of chimerical kinds of creatures, like there have been sightings from this part of Texas all the way into Maryland of a goat man, which is basically in the shape of a satyr from Greek mythology. So that just in terms of taxonomic nomenclature, that'll kind of give the audience an idea of what we're talking about as we go forward this evening.
Wow. Do you think these are increasing in the last days, or have these been something that's have always been around, and maybe we're just now hearing about it more? Or what's your thought on that?
Well, my sense of the matter is that just quantifiably there are more sightings of these kinds of things now, and that may, on the one hand, it could have something to do with the fact that we're just equipped with better tools to record sightings and encounters. But on the other hand, there may be something significant about it in terms of biblical prophecy, particularly those that deal with the material that we find in books like Revelation. But they do certainly seem to be popping up more often now.
Wow. So this is kind of, are we talking about werewolves? Are we talking about Mothman?
Sure.
Are we talking about some of these, of course, Sasquatch, right?
Sure.
I know somebody, I've actually met somebody who claims that she saw a Bigfoot, and she didn't want to tell anybody because she thought everybody would think she's crazy. And I don't think she's crazy. But she says she saw it. So it's pretty interesting,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it is too. There, with some of these animals, there are really two ways to go. Like with the Sasquatch, it could be it could be that we're dealing with a very elusive species, and there's just a purely naturalistic explanation for it. But then you have people who have sightings of this thing that are accompanied by UFO sightings, claims that this thing manifests out of nowhere through some kind of portal. So some of them, a hefty chunk of them, in fact, some of these accounts actually reference, an accompanying paranormal activity. You also referenced things like werewolves and Mothman. Right here in Texas, just up the road from me, a couple hours in the Panhandle, there have been a number of Mothman sightings up near the town of Crosbyton, and my buddy Joe Taylor has recorded a number of those accounts from the people that actually experienced these encounters. So yeah, I would say that in general, that sightings are on the rise. The other one that I think of off the top of my head was, this is just within the past couple of months, there was a dogman werewolf sighting in Amarillo, Texas, where I used to live. So, they do seem to be popping up more and more. Now, as to the mechanism or means of their reappearance or supposed reappearance, it may be that we as humans are now reacquiring the ability, the technology to splice things at a genetic level that hasn't been done since the Genesis 6 experiment, which your audience will be so familiar with.
Is there any thought in your mind that when you said the appearance and then sudden manifestation? I know our buddy Gary Stearman mentioned to me he suspects that if they're there, they're actually sort of a supernatural, like a demon or whatnot that is manifesting in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered.
Well, that's entirely.
Mm-hmm. What your thoughts are?
That's entirely possible. I think that's entirely possible. Like I say, I've heard more and more of these sort of encounters that involve a kind of supernatural element to them,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's entirely possible that at least some of the sightings are demonic entities.
Mm-hmm.
I've even heard people go so far as to say they were remnant populations, feral populations of ancient giant tribes. That to me seems tenable. I used to, when I was in graduate school working on my anthropology degree, I remember reading some stuff that Grover Krantz had written, and he was an anthropologist at Washington State University, and he thought that Sasquatch were remnant populations of Gigantopithecus. And so for the longest time, I was just purely naturalistic in, my beliefs about Bigfoot, until I started to hear more and more of these encounters.
Uh-oh.
Looks like you got stuck.
He froze. Oh, no. Well, all right. While we're waiting for him to come back, I brought up Isaiah 13. This is the King James Version, just so people know. But it talks about satyrs that shall dance there. All right, so this is the word se'erim, or se'ir. So it's something that's hairy, kind of shaggy. So you can see there in the definitions, according to BDB, that satyr may refer to a demon-possessed goat like the swine of Gadara. So, it's kind of interesting just to kind of figure out, what might be going on there. But Dr. Burton, are you back? All right, awesome. You froze.
I'm back.
You froze for a second. Okay, yeah.
An example of an ancient word that I would have no clue what it meant in our King James version of the Bible.
Yeah. So go on. You were explaining about the sightings, and you used to think that it was just Gigantopithecus.
I was
right? Yeah.
Right. I was a pure naturalist about it initially, until I started to hear more of these sightings that were accompanied by all kinds of paranormal phenomena. So it does seem like there's a supernatural into it. Now, they certainly could be demonic manifestations, and I've also heard the idea that they were remnant populations of giant tribes that had basically become feral. That's a possibility too. But I think as the years roll on, I think we're going to find that there is more of a supernatural connection there. And I couldn't help but see that. I couldn't help but see as you came in, you were referencing Isaiah chapter 34.
13, yeah, chapter 13.
Oh, 13, okay.
Yeah, talking about the satyrs. Yeah, I think you probably have something to say on that. So
that's not,
certainly.
That's not satyr as in SEDAR, is it? It's like the satyr, you know, like the
no, oh no, SEDER. Oh, okay. No, it's
sorry.
not.
You know, these guys are in sort of a Hebrew thing, you know. So
that was like a weird dad joke, I think.
I tried. It was like a dad joke.
Hey, Doug Woodward, I'm going to give you an A+ for saying Hebrew and not Jewish. Thank you.
That's right. I did say Hebrew.
Oh, there you go.
That's right.
All right. Bonus point for Doug.
Should have said biblical. That would have been perfect. Right?
Hey, that biblical, Hebraic, that's all biblical.
All right. Good.
That's funny. Yeah, so go on, Judd. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the satyrs.
I wonder if he's
Hello?
lost the connection.
Yeah, we hear you.
We can see you. Your eyes blinking.
Okay.
Okay. Did you want to kind of maybe give us some insight on Isaiah 13 there on the satyrs and what your research has uncovered regarding those?
Well, my journey down that road really started with my dissertation research on Peneus. I wrote a religious history of Peneus. That really went back to prehistory. But this is really the first time that I became familiar with some of the literature associated with outside of this. And I say literature, I'm talking about articles and whatnot, academic articles on topics like satyrs and the direct analog for that and the Levantine cultures, the Sherim, or the hairy. We usually get a really bad translation of it in the English, which I'm sure that you guys will, you in particular, Doug, but all of you probably agree. We get this really weird translation either as hairy ones or he goats, but they're clearly these desert goat demons. They were really prolific in the mythology and lore of the ancient Near East. They show up in god form in as Ods and Uds and Adzaga and Maru and the Assyrian Benu. In fact, it's only been a couple of years ago that they found an inscription in a cave in northern Iraq that would have been in the kingdom of Assyria, detailing what this thing looked like and some of the proscriptions that they took to keep it at bay. But very clearly, if you saw this thing in any other context, you would say, "Hey, that looks like Pan," or "That looks like a satyr." So really, that idea is very prolific in the ancient Near East, and there's an argument to be made that that's in fact where the Greeks got that from. The influence of the ancient Near East on Greek culture is well documented. There are several what scholars call Orientalizing periods in Greece's history. But getting back to the Sherim, that was sort of my introduction to that world. But I mean, very clearly, not only there, but also in Isaiah chapter 34. There's some very, very. If you're looking at it in the Hebrew, it's very clearly spelled out. And anyone familiar with ancient Hebrew culture, with the language, and certainly the Hebrews living at that time would have been abundantly familiar with these things.
It's the Baphomet, correct? The top left picture there? That's what
yeah.
I heard called.
Well, yeah, that's certainly a later iteration, but that's the same basic.
Is Baphomet one of? Is he a satyr, or are they one and the same? So not like it's a synonym.
This is not my area of expertise, hence why I'm asking.
Nor mine.
Right.
Yeah.
Although I have a lot of questions though, so I'll be asking a lot of questions tonight.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, the Baphomet is an aggregate of a kind of conglomeration. But if you look at it in terms of kind of the Seder form being the basis for it, then that's certainly part of the makeup of the imagery of the Baphomet. And this imagery is also tied with Azazel, who, we just finished Yom Kippur. Azazel is referenced in the atonement sacrifice, and his dispatch, the Azazel goat in the atonement sacrifice, is actually a mirror, a kind of mimicry of the dispatchment that Azazel himself gets in the pre-flood world from God. And so that I say all that just to say that the goat imagery in the Baphomet stems a lot from Azazel, and it also stems from just that root.
Uh-oh.
We lost him again.
Frozen again.
That's too bad. Yeah, so I pulled up the Azazel. That's how I'd pronounce it. But,
Yeah, Azazel. You say potato. You say potato. I'll say
that's
potato.
fine. I'm happy. Potato, man.
We say Azazel down here. So
yeah, south of the Mason-Dixon line.
So anyway, just here's some basic pictures for what it's worth of Azazel or Azazel, just so people know, and just kind of a little context there. It is talked about in Leviticus, right, where it says that there is going to be a sacrifice l'Adonai for the Lord, and then there's one for Azazel. Okay, and this of course begs the question, right? The word "ez" is the word goat, and so it could be a goat, but it could also be kind of this Seder goat thing, right? This goat pan type creature.
Sure.
And I kind of lean to the latter. That I think that this is just like you're saying, that it's some kind of a goat god, a hybrid goat god, if you will. But go on, please.
Right. Well, and that what I was saying about the Italian, Doug, you'll be abundantly familiar with this, I'm sure. I'm certain that you and I have had conversations about it over the years, but the goat to Azazel was not. It's not as if the Hebrews were worshiping Azazel. This was the goat that all the sin was ascribed to, just as all sin was ascribed to Azazel in the pre-flood judgment. But yeah, getting back to the prolific nature of these kinds of goat, half man, half goat creatures, they abound in different parts of the world. In the Americas, you find them, and they even survive in a lot of the tales of Arabic lore into modern times. There were these giant versions of basically of the Sharim that were supposedly would haunt the mountain passes that caravans would have to go through on trade routes. And the tales go that they would waylay people who were on these roads and, basically consume them, eat their flesh. So there always seems to be some sort of nefarious, mischievous, and downright, in a lot of cases, downright wicked and evil motivations for these kinds of entities. And that's certainly true of probably the best known of them, Pan. If you look at Pan in Greek mythology, his behavior is, to put it euphemistically, pretty sprightly. I mean, it's not like he's trying to woo the females he's going after. This guy would be a convicted sex offender, in the modern world.
And
And
Dr. Burton, let's
of
just a
course-
minute. I just want to address for people that may not have
Mhm.
made the connection of what is Banias. So Banias is also known as the gates of Hades, right? That's where Jesus took his disciples. It's at the base of Mount Hermon, right? So
That's right.
kind of interesting,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
and
Matthew
and
chapter 16. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and so there was a lot of activity, at least as early as 300 or 400 BC, on the part of the Greeks, right? And I think according to your research, it went back a lot further than that, right? But
Yeah, certainly.
they definitely were worshiping Pan or Pan at that
Mhm.
area, and
Mhm.
yeah, there was a lot of sexual innuendo is probably putting it too nicely.
Right.
So
Right.
but yeah, that was definitely there, and related very much to what happened on top of the mountain as well, of Mount Hermon. So
That's very true.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the modern. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doug.
No, I just please continue.
No, the modern name Banias is the Arabic rendering of Paneas, which is
Yeah.
where the site gets its name from. When the Seleucids, actually the Ptolemies, who were descendants of one of Alexander's generals, had control of this region initially, and then they fought a battle actually with the Seleucids at Paneas, at what they called the Paneon at the time. And of course, but I say all this just to say that the Greeks recognized the auspiciousness of the site, and they identified the deity that was being worshipped there with their Pan, and so they dubbed it the Paneon. But Doug, you also pointed out that this region was known as the Gates of Hell, which was a moniker that actually had existed since Phoenician times. This makes perfect sense because caves in the ancient world were very auspicious for a number of reasons, but probably the most prominent one was that they were entrances into the underworld. And that too is almost a cultural perennial in world mythology, is this idea that caves were somehow connected to the chthonic world, an entrance into the underworld.
Yeah, Scott.
Real quick, for all you guys, because you're more knowledgeable in this than I am, but in Daniel it talks about the Prince of Greece and the Prince of Persia. I'm just wondering out loud if this entity, this goat god, might be that head little g god, if you will, that's over Greece. So, what are y'all thoughts on that?
I don't have any thoughts on that.
Well,
there is a principality over Greece. There was a principality over Persia.
Right.
Different principalities were established over the nations, and so I just didn't know if there a primary. I mean, I know about Zeus, but is there a primary, more demonic type of god that holds sway in Greek ancient mythology, which there may be more truth to a lot of the mythology than what we were led to believe as kids growing up? I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is an interesting question. There are some mythologists that think that Pan actually may be the oldest of the gods in the Greek pantheon, that he may somehow predate the Olympians. That may be. I don't know that you could prove that conclusively. But you bring up an interesting question, especially in reference to Daniel. It's pretty clear that he's talking about the gods of the nations, these fallen Elohim that were given, they were given control over different geographical regions of the earth. And it just depends on which author you're reading. And I'm talking not so much ancient or not so much modern authors as I am ancient authors that talk about which deities are in control of Greece at any one point in time, because they do sort of shift around. Just looking at the literature in the Greek tradition.
Interesting. So, Dr. Burton, you and I discussed with you some of my research in Cryptic Image 2, which I thought was, of course, I thought was interesting. A little biased, But in any event, remember that the sons of God came down on Mount Hermon.
Mhm.
And I just forgot my thought. That's really embarrassing. Oh goodness.
We're all getting older.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going somewhere with this. I really did have a destination. I wasn't just trying to throw that in there. But hold on, it'll come back to me. So.
And Doug Woodward forgot to unmute his mic, so we're just all having senior moments.
We're all just
And
like, oh my god.
And I was gonna say, I forgot your name, Fred. So
Okay, so I guess my thinking was, could there be, could we be seeing some kind of a resurgence with, these ancient gods? I do believe that based on the inscription that we found on top of the mountain, that is an incredibly old site. It's incredibly important. And, as far as, Pan, I don't know, to me, they're all general iterations of Satan in one form or another. Because he's kind of like stuck on himself, and I don't think he likes to share the spotlight, as far as I can tell. Right. And when Jesus, okay, this is what I was getting at. So Jesus said to his disciples, right, the gates of Hades will not prevail. And I really believe that what Satan had planned was for the gates of Hades to open up back in Jesus' day. The first century Jewish apocalyptists believed that the gates of Hades were going to open up at any moment, and that these hordes of demonic creatures were going to come out and just raise havoc on planet Earth. Okay,
like we see in Revelation.
Exactly. And I think what I think what Jesus did is, I think he put the kibosh on. He's like, nope, not today. Not in this era, right? It'll happen later. We know that from Revelation chapter 9. It will happen. But I think Satan's plan was for it to happen back then. And I think that's why Jesus took his disciples and basically said, you know what, this is the real place. This is the real deal. And then he took them up to the mount, on top of the mountain, where he transfigured. And that's where Satan and let's call it Satan's cronies, came back down in the days of Noah. And they did all their hocus pocus and, naughty stuff. All right. And so I think this was really a huge event that Jesus stopped. I mean, I can't absolutely prove that, but I think there's enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that Satan and his crew wanted to open the gates, and Jesus said, not right now. So.
And gates, I've always looked at that as like a gate being also a defensive. Again, we could get it. I mean, this passage right now that we're talking about, it's certainly not Peter being the Pope. I think all four of us can amen that immediately. But I believe, I actually think Heiser got this part right, that the rock he's referring to is the Mount Hermon in that situation. Yeah. And based on that ancient lore, if you will, and other evidence that, that portal to hell, that portal down below where you have all the spooky, weird stuff. Next time I go to Israel, I do want to go to Mount Hermon, to the base. I went to the top and just kept driving north. But I do believe that is, that's what he was doing. Is he was identifying who he was to Satan, to these other powers and principalities. And I've never heard that theory, Doug, but it certainly makes sense that you're not getting let out of your abyss, your prison. You can look at a gate like a prison too. In other words, the abyss where they're currently chained, where Satan is not chained right now, but will be chained for that seventh day, that 1,000 years, saying these gates ain't opening up. My ecclesia, I'm going to build my Adah, my congregation of followers, and this will have no effect on them as far as being a let out, as opposed to us assailing the gates of hell.
Right. Yeah.
Charismatic, like we're going to attack demons, and no, I don't want anything to do with demons. I don't. No.
Right. Yeah, and so this was a euphemism when they talked about the city. So sometimes it was just called the city, and that was the underworld, right? And so that was very much thought to be a major portal where the demons were trying to get out, right? Yeah, like you said, Scott, it's not that the demons are closing the doors. You're not going to get us. You're not going to get us. No, they're trying to get out. They're not trying to stay in. They're trying to get out. That's the whole point. And yeah,
I had
I think
never
Jesus,
thought about it until you just popped that up. As these gates are just like prison gates. I had to visit. I called you on the way up there. I was like, I'm going to prison. Thankfully, I get to leave. After a few hours.
Yeah.
You don't want to be there. So
Yeah,
I'm an attorney.
I believe
Judge,
that yeah, I understand. I think that the word that's actually used there is poulon for gate. If I'm not mistaken, the Greek is poulon. Which is the connotation there is, that it's a city gate, but I think subsequent uses include fortress and prison, both of which I think would be applicable in this case.
Yeah. So this whole area that we're talking about, Panias or Banias, because the Arabs don't have a P in their letter, so it comes out Banias. But this is, of course, where we're talking about satyrs. We've already touched on Bigfoot a little bit. Tell us more. I mean, I think it's entirely plausible that we could be seeing an acceleration, maybe, of opening of portals, opening of these weird creatures. I remain skeptical until I see a bit more evidence of some of these particular manifestations. But I think in principle, at least in my mind, it's very plausible that these could happen.
Could I throwing a wrench in it, but was wanting to kind of pertains to Doug Hamp to what you just said, which is that in days gone by, you had these little supernatural creatures that like fairies and fairy circles. You had leprechauns. These were. I've read some literature that suggests that these were also demonic entities, but that was the way that they were manifesting at that time because they didn't have flying machines, so they were manifesting in other ways. And one of the interesting things about the fairies and the fairy circles, one of the stories that they have, or one of the traditions that they had, was that persons that went into a fairy circle might be lost for some number of years, or that they would have a child and then leave and then be brought back to nurture the child, which sounds just like alien abduction. So, I'll just throw that out as another line of thought, because we're talking about other creatures that aren't necessarily aliens, but they're kind of like the satyr, or there's other kind of chimeras and things like that. So anyway,
my friend who's fascinated with, he's not a believer, but he's fascinated with ancient aliens and Bigfoots and these hybrids and everything. So I texted him. He couldn't watch live now, but he goes, "Yeah, Bigfoots are hybrids, man." So I'm like, we all agree that if they exist.
I'm not sure about that.
When I say hybrids, we're sort of talking about Nephilim, if you will. Sort of, I don't know. I've never seen one. Okay, I'm not sitting here up on the stand right now testifying that there are that these things exist.
Right.
But sort of like the UFOs. I haven't seen the UFOs, but the evidence these days is overwhelming for this spooky, supernatural other realm, if you will. Not little green men, but these other realmly beings. And perhaps some of what we're talking about would be a mixture of the natural with the supernatural, and what comes out, or more scientific. They knew back then how to monkey around, pun intended, with DNA. And we're starting to see that now as the technology gets more and more developed and warped and twisted, if you will.
I think Dr. Burton has a whole bunch to say on that. So, Judd,
no,
please,
I think that we're
share with us.
I think we're awfully close, with some of the stuff that we're able to do now. And this is all pertinent, I think, to the end times. Like you say, Doug, we, until we can actually see these in real form, it's hard to say, with a high degree of certainty, that, are they being birthed from our science, or are they purely supernatural, or is it a mixture of the two? Is this Watcher Tech 2.0, that we're sort of dealing with right now? It's hard to say, but it makes me think that there's room in the interpretation of passages like that we find in Revelation chapter 9, about these creatures being released from the abyss, this army from the abyss. I think it's safe to say that, that's not, that army's not quite human, in other words. So I think there's a little bit of interpretive room, I think, there to look at what's going on in the world, because we're also cautioned to, not be like the Pharisees and know how to predict the weather, but they can't read the signs of the times. I think Jesus told them that, like in the chapter in a few episodes before they arrive in Caesarea Philippi, when he encounters them. He tells them that very thing. You guys can predict the weather, but you can't read the signs of the times. Well, that's something that we don't need to be, I don't think we need to be very cautious and discerning about that. And at least be open-minded enough to say that, well, these strange phenomena, do pose, they do have a kind of prophetic ominence to them.
Judd, in your research, it talks about how when Israel's invading the land that God would send hornets. And I don't think those are just little bitty stinging bugs, stinging hornets the way we think of. Have you ever done any research into that in the ancient cultures, as far as there being any super bugs that would come in and maybe would have destroyed civilizations, like acting at the, maybe under the dominion of principality, but God uses them as he uses them the way he wants to. They do nothing without his authority. And if he commands a hornet / demon bug to go attack somebody, they're going to do it. They don't have any choice. I think that's why they're going to be tormenting those that take the mark of the beast for that 5-month period. So have you ever done any research on that Hebrew word or any culture?
No, I haven't. I haven't done any deep dives in that respect, but it is interesting that the insect imagery, particularly swarming insects, which I guess technically you could include hornets as, because if you've ever accidentally or purposefully knocked down a hornet's nest, you do know that they can swarm. So
they are mean clovers.
They are. But this sort of, whether we're talking about locusts or hornets or what have you, that swarming imagery gives the impression of certainly of overwhelming whatever it's after. Now as to some sort of chimera or creature that's associated with that, I don't know. But as you point out, God can use these natural phenomena to carry out his will. But I'd have to look some more into that. I'd never actually thought about that. That's an interesting proposition.
I just didn't know if there was anything in culture about like some type of supernatural winged entity as a.
It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. I mean, those things show up. Those kinds of things show up in the mythology of cultures all over the world, ancient and modern.
So, thank you. I just it's ever since I've read that and I started doing. I'm viewing Revelation now more through the eyes of the Torah, through the first 5 books, seeing that there's a recapitulation, and then that led me to seeing these hornet-like creatures coming up out of the abyss. And the hornets, basically, God said he would fight for Israel.
Right.
He used supernatural means to do so.
Yeah, well, I think we should look at, more and more, I think we should look at Revelation through the lens of the Torah, because, Moses and John are kind of given mirror images in terms of their vision. So neither one of them really have the context, to fully articulate what they're seeing. Whereas John is shown this vision of the end times with things in the world and world culture that he's never seen before. Moses is he's being given the same kind of thing, except he's being shown a vision of at least for the Genesis material, the primeval history. He's being shown things that are sending him to loop too, and so that's why this stuff sounds so odd and strange to us. But I think you're right. I think, and I certainly feel that way too. That using the Torah to look at the prophecies in the New Testament is crucial to my mind, because of the almost it's the same mission that Moses and John have, but they're looking at opposite ends of the spectrum.
They're looking at the beginning of the taking out versus at the end. We're to come
Absolutely.
out of the blood and we're to be gathered and to the promised land. We will finally enter that rest in Hebrews 4 that he writes about, that we haven't entered yet. It's they were preached the same gospel in the wilderness, and yet they were
Sure.
disobedient. So they did not enter the rest. The adult generation, except for Caleb and Joshua, wandered around for 40 years. And supernaturally, they didn't have their clothes wear out. The kids were wearing the same clothes when they were 4 years old as when they were 44 years old. So
Right.
I see that happening at the end of the age, supernatural stuff. So I'm not really worried about the super demon bugs or whatever comes up out of the abyss. Those things didn't touch Israel. Israel got themselves in trouble.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I brought up just this because this is something that I talk about in my book that I discovered that kind of freaked me out, because this right here is precisely the creature that's predicted to come out in Revelation chapter 9. You can see the scorpion's tail. There's got a serpent head phallus. It's got eagle's wings. It has the body of a horse, but also, of course, a centaur, man's head, and a lion's head. And you can't see it too well in this one, but these horses' feet actually turn into eagle's talons. So it really is just an incredible description. And what really speaks to me so powerfully is that what John was being shown is something that people in the ancient world had already seen. How did they see this? My suspicion is, well, unless they actually saw it in the physical, I think they probably saw it somehow in some kind of spiritual seance, or somehow they were connecting with that spirit realm, and so they were seeing real creatures that are predicted to come out. And so I think when we start talking about some of these other creatures, whether it's Bigfoot or satyrs or whatever it may be, or Pan, right, that this isn't just weirdness. The Bible, it's weird, yes, but the Bible attests to what is coming, and we actually see it drawn out for us in the ancient world. So I think
that's pretty neat, Doug, what you just showed us. It does raise all kinds of questions.
Doesn't it though?
Oh,
I know,
it does.
I know. This is from 1200 BC.
Right.
It's it's like you got to deal with it. There it is, And
don't you think though that it could well be that the Apostle John, in his vision, is not that he's remembering that he's seen this before, but that he was inspired to, in effect, picture the same thing.
Exactly.
And and that it has been, it's sort of been, the concept's been there, and it's another way in which it's made relevant to the people that first heard the revelation.
Right.
Hey, Doug, what's the provenience for this? Where was it found?
So this is found in ancient, Assyria. I forget the exact city, but it's called a Kuduru stone. And I got the city in my book, but it's a Kuduru stone. So this is about 1200 BC. They would put this under the mantle of a house for good luck or whatever it's supposed to be.
Right.
and this is the god Nergal. Okay, and
Nergal,
Nergal is the god of the underworld. Okay,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
He's the god of the gates of Hades. Right. I mean, he's the dude
Right.
that, and he has lots of variations on that theme. You know, so
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it's not just one, and you see him way back. I mean, we can go back, and I can show a different. I'll pull up a picture in just a second of basically the same thing. It's called the Anzu bird, and that's from about 3000 BC. You know, and it morphs a little bit over time, but it's the same basic creature.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, so
Perfect.
again, when we come to other things like satyrs and Pan, yeah,
Right.
it's weird, no question about it. But you know, the fact that we see what John is saying versus and compared it with what we find in the ancient world, it's like, wow, there's really something to this. You know?
Yeah, there it is. Exactly. And you know, antique peoples were still thinking, you know, they still had a mythological mind. You know, they were still trafficking with at least spirits of these entities. You know, that mode of thinking, and of course the Hebrews, you know, they thought mythologically too, but it was you know, unless they adulterated it with you know, worshiping Canaanite deities or Phoenician deities or what have you. It was the vision that was given to them by Yahweh, but they're still thinking, you know, in terms of mythology. And we didn't really start to get away from that until really an argument can be made for the Middle Ages, but the nail in the coffin for, you know, naturalism and materialism to take over and sort of peripheralize religion and superstition, that was the age of enlightenment. You know, the empirical movement that grew out of the scientific revolution in Europe, to where everything rested on pure empiricism. And so for virtually, you know, as for the most part, for most of human history, that's what we thought. You know, we thought that either dealing with, fending off or trafficking, you know, with, depending on what culture you're talking about, these kinds of entities was almost an everyday occurrence.
Yeah, and here in this picture, this is from ancient Uruk. So it's I forget the exact date, but it's at least 3000 BC, maybe 3700 BC. So it goes back a very long way.
That's during the transitional period between the Ugaritic, or not Ugaritic, excuse me, the Ubaid phase and the Sumerian phase. That's really interesting, Doug.
Yeah. So you can see there, the hind legs have eagle's talons, right? You can see the scorpion tail. You can't see the serpent head phallus, but we saw that in the other one. And you can see, you know, that there's two heads there, right? And on that one head, there's something that looks like a crown, right? You know, we kind of think of like a British royal crown, right? But not all crowns look like British royal crowns, right? This looks more like kind of a, well, ancient Sumerian / kind of Egyptian-ish type crown. That was something. Sorry?
Kind of a Pope hat.
Yeah. Kind of a Pope hat.
A little bit of Pope hat. Wonder where he gets that from.
Right. So I don't know if you can see, guys, my cursor here, but this other thing, that's the lion's head right there.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't see too much detail in this one.
Right.
But it has all the things that we have in the other one. It's just a whole lot older. And yeah, I mean, this is what was going to come out of the abyss, right? And that's what was there where Jesus took everybody to Panias or to Banias, and he put the kibosh on it. So I'm glad he did.
You're right. I like the way you put it. He put the kibosh on it. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. We've got a question from Matt24. Do you guys think that Parsons Hubbard's Babylon working ritual opened a portal so that these sightings of cryptids are more prevalent?
Nick Redfern's book goes into this quite a bit. Final Events. Has anybody besides me read that book?
I've not.
No.
Yeah.
I've read some of I've read some of Nick's stuff before, but I've never read that one.
Yeah, that book, he goes into this quite a bit, and in fact, I was doing a slideshow today that actually came up as I was looking at my slides. But yeah, apparently there was this. It's a long story, but there was this group of people that were doing research. They really believed that they were working as sort of a group underneath the military and out of the Pentagon. And I don't remember how many years ago this was. This was quite a number of years ago. But they came to the conclusion that the whatever these entities were, that they were demonic, and so they said they had a conversation with the people at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is where a lot of the supposed actual UFOs are or stored, not just Area 51, and that they attributed a lot to the issue of Babylon working, and Jack Parsons, his rituals in the desert. So what I understand, though, is that he may have opened portals to demons, but he also supposedly conjured up a Babylon. What's the right term for it? The whore of Babylon, Marjorie Cameron, who became his gal friend. So yeah, so there's quite a bit of history to that. Of course, I've always been suspicious of that because demons don't seem to have a problem manifesting in our times. I'm not sure that they need a portal to be let in.
Yeah.
Does that have anything to do with the CERN theories? I mean, obviously, I watched that CERN ceremony, and that might as well have been straight from Babylon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, my wife, ever since in the past few years, since she started to understand the symbolism and everything, and she's been bedridden for quite some time. So obviously, she watches a lot more television than I do. But now she's like, man, Scott, the occult symbolism and everything is everywhere. But I think you'd have to live under a rock not to have watched the CERN ceremony. You got something's going on here with some ancient pagan mythology.
Yeah, you've got the CERN dances that are like on videotapes. And then you had the it wasn't Gothard. I don't think it was Gotham. Something like Gothard or Gotham tunnel that was opened in the mountains there, connecting Geneva with at CERN with I forget what highway or whatever. But
that was weird.
Yeah, I don't know, Judd. I don't know if you saw it, but there were a lot of creepy little creatures that look like.
I did.
Chimeras
I did see it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you were thinking that way.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw it, I was like, this is straight out of well, in particular, there were lots of images from Slavic and Celtic and Germanic mythology.
Yeah.
There were clearly these ancient European pagan roots that they were trying to make connection. But the very acronym CERN is an abbreviation for the name Cernunnos, the Celtic god of the underworld. Yeah.
I was just getting ready to say that. Yeah.
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 So it's not, it's more of that hiding in plain sight stuff. I mean, really, they're not even trying to hide it. The people who don't want to believe it, who just sort of poo-poo the idea, I think is a little odd too, because you've got all this pagan imagery associated with it. And for goodness sake, there's a statue of Shiva in front of the visitor center.
Yeah, there's that.
The god of destruction.
There's that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's challenging because I think they're doing real science, but there's something just off about, like, why are you choosing these symbols? I mean, maybe you're doing good research, but it sure begs the question that maybe you're doing something that's a little
it definitely ties it. The god of creation, Shiva, is actually the god of destruction as well, but in order to create a new world, it has to destroy the world. And it's a little bit like the movie Star Trek II, where they're going to wipe out the Earth again with the Genesis project or whatever. but it's that concept that the world's going to get wiped out and then be it's like a reboot, you know.
Yeah. So
And,
the whales can have
yeah,
their day.
The best line from that conversation in that movie was, "The man's talking about logic. We're talking about universal Armageddon here."
Yeah.
You gotta love Dr. McCoy. Dr. McCoy puts it in the perfect context.
Yeah, he always had good things to say.
So a question is, see if you can get Doug Woodward to play the piano behind him.
It's only a picture. It's only a picture. It's if I turned off my background, you'd see my dirty office. So, yeah. I would love to live in that house, though. If anybody knows where that is, let me know.
Yeah, really.
I'll make them an offer.
So here's a just kind of a comment, and so Winged Infinity says in one comment, but didn't Jesus command us to cast out demons? That's a question.
Yeah.
And then here this comment: the majority of Christian churches speak zero about demons, yet Jesus spoke about them and dealt with them constantly. Isn't that interesting? That is interesting, right? So
again, I just posted in chat, and y'all can think my wife's crazy. She can sometimes see into this realm. She's described it to me. These like I guess visions, or she doesn't describe them as a vision. Something that's just sitting right there. Now this has been months ago, and I put it in chat since my son moved out. She hasn't seen anything, so. Keep him in your prayers because he's gotten involved in some of this stuff that these kids these days think is harmless, and now he's under repression. And so anyway, so this is real, and so if I could rewind the clock and do it over, my children when they were younger he would have never watched shows like Supernatural and things of that nature. So you can't rewind the clock. So y'all keep them in your prayers. This what we're talking about is very, very, very serious and real, and I'm seeing it in real time in my son's life right now. As far as
and I just want to encourage people that this is very real, but we do serve a God who is all powerful, right? So there's really no contest between God and Satan, right? So I don't want people to think in this dualistic idea that God's over here and Satan's over here, and they're both vying for who's going to win, right? The only power that Satan has is he can influence us, and then we can make decisions to kind of go down that path, right? But insofar as God's power versus Satan's, there's no contest, right? So if we'll hold close to Abba, then we don't have anything to fear, right? And it's only when we are tempted and we're drawn away by our own decisions, right? Of course, a little temptation, but we're drawn away, then we can get ourselves in trouble.
And in this situation, he opened himself up to it, thinking that it was harmless. Friends of his, acquaintances, other things kids do that I tell him all the time, dude, I can't cast any stones at you, or I just broke my entire college, law school house down with portals, things that kids take that are a doorway to allowing evil into your life, and so without divulging too much else, but yeah, it's real. So
it's unfortunate.
What your wife? I was just going to comment that what your wife experiences is something that a lot of people experience, particularly people that are really sensitive. And so always a reminder: no, you're not crazy. It's just that some people are close. Some people are close to this, and some people aren't.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything and don't want to. I don't consider it a gift of hers that she can maybe see into this other realm, but it doesn't even frighten her. She said that when it was happening, sometimes they would just look at her like and want her to be scared, and she's like, and then they would notice she was looking at her, and then they would kind of like smirk away from her. So. and I'm oblivious to it all.
Well, that reminds me. There's one of the, and this is kind of related to that, is the concept in, I think it was more in Nordic cultures, the concept of the old hag that would basically appear in someone's bedroom. It's very much like a demonic or an abduction scenario of the Greys, appearing in the bedroom. and but that's something that's gone on for several hundred years. So I don't know, Jenny, you run into that?
Yeah, you're talking about old hag syndrome, and its association with sleep paralysis. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
that's probably much older. It's probably millennia old, if not older than that.
yeah.
Really, I think at least for the post-flood world, I think the kind of the linchpin in that story, or really the origin, is with Lilith, and not the one that you find in non-canonical lore, but the actual queen of demons. You know, in addition to stealing babies and eating the flesh of children, she was also said to steal the virility of men. And so there's this whole swooping in night demon motif that Lilith fits. I know that Doug can probably speak to this too, with his familiarity with not only the ancient Hebrew tradition, but the Mesopotamian material as well. And of course, she shows up in Isaiah as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Lilith comes from the root Lila, which means night, and so that's where this whole idea comes from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is though. I think one of the points to make is that this was kind of the thing I was saying earlier about fairies and leprechauns and all that, is that the supernatural and its deceptiveness has been present, for millennia, and it can shift. It's not a pun about shape shifting, but it can shift from one form to another, but it's still the same gods or demons behind it. That's my sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. I think it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to bring up a comment, but please go ahead.
No, I was just going to quickly point out that, you've even got writers in the ufology community who in recent decades have come out and made those comparisons, like Jacques Vallée is the first guy that really kind of comes to mind, about how you would identify the activities of the so-called aliens. I don't think they're extraterrestrial biological entities. I think they're extra-dimensional. But he said if you look at these kind of activities in other periods, they would be identified as gnomes or fairies or demons, evil spirits. Yeah.
Yeah, and both John Mack and David Jacobs. I think it was in the abduction stuff with John Mack. He talks about this in an interview, that these beings were saying that they are some kind of semi-materialized race, and they want to come to planet Earth. They want to live with us, and so they're trying to find a way to do that. And I don't see any reason why this could not have been happening for a long time now. That they've been trying to find a way, and then as our collective sense of what is real, what's not, how we got here, our origin story, I think that they're basically keeping up, or maybe they're kind of they're directing it, you could say, as well. But aliens are very much in vogue, and of course not everyone believes in UFOs and all that stuff, but if you look at your average evolutionist or person, Big Bang theorist or whatever, that doesn't believe in God, they'll say, well, look, we believe that there was some ancient race that probably seeded the planet. This is directed panspermia.
Right.
There's a lot of big names that are okay with this, right? Richard Dawkins, he talks about this, right? In No Intelligence Allowed.
Yeah, I call it kicking the can.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
did they come from?
Yeah, we can't believe in God, but we can believe in some ancient aliens that got everything started.
Right.
So that's very much in vogue, but it's the same basic thing that we've been looking at forever. So here's a question by Herminio Suazo. are these creatures fallen angels embodied in a physical manner, or creatures created by them? That's an interesting thought. So are they embodied by, like, are these fallen angels embodying these things, or are they creatures that are created by the fallen angels? Any sense on that?
I would suspect that they're not fallen angels, that they are demonic entities. I think fallen angels have a lot bigger stuff going on. That's my first reaction. There's probably more to be said, but it's my first reaction.
In my opinion, demons and fallen angels are the exact same thing, but I know that.
Oh, you're so wrong too about that. But anyway,
I'm so right, dude. Linguistically, they're the same thing.
Yeah,
but it's okay.
Linguistics has little to do with it. Whether
it's got a lot to do with it, man.
Conceptually, they're quite different.
Hey, speaking of this, I want to ask Judd about this. What about the reptilians? Would they, and for you too, Doug, would they be more along the lines of like a Nephilim hybrid, if they exist or not? I mean, I've seen the videos that they've shown. I don't know if they're doctored or not, and I'm going to say any names, or all of a sudden somebody's eyes, like famous people's eyes, go lizard, snake eyes on them.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth, right, had the reptilian eyes.
Yeah. No, I wasn't going to say names. George.
Yeah. Well, what's the English sportscaster, David? What's his name? That has these 4-hour talks that he gets up and does. I can't think what his name is, but he's very famous. He's been
David Icke.
Yeah, David Icke.
Yeah, that guy's on the false light train, by the way. He's waking people up to other falsehood. So.
Oh, I think so too. Although there's some interesting overlap between what he's saying and some of the things that we say.
Oh yeah, he's talking exactly what we're talking about. He calls them. He believes that yes, there is a reptilian. There are these hybrids. There are these very, very evil people who want to take over the world, and we must awake and seek the light, and the good of humanity will overcome them. Again, that's why I'm calling it the false light, the Hegelian dialectic, if you will, the left versus the right, the Democrats versus the Republicans. So the reptilians versus the good angel guys who aren't really good. Yeah. They're false angels of light, if you will. So
yeah, I think one possibility there is that they're, if they are visible at all, then they may be fallen seraphim, because the seraphim are described as having sort of reptilian serpent-like skin. It's got that iridescent kind of quality to it that some reptiles do. Doug, what do you think about that? Have you thought about that before?
I'm sorry, I was looking at the questions. But
about the seraphim and having a reptilian type of quality.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely plausible. I mean, we have the 4 faces of the. I think cherubim and seraphim are exactly the same thing.
Interesting on that, real quick. Interesting that you have the 4 faces and the 4 kind of animal groups kind of in there, but you don't have the reptilians.
That's
you got
true.
some birds, you got some humans, you got a bovine.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in the the constellations and in the signs of the zodiac, one of the eagle is really a snake, and that's the same. And I know Doug Hamp and Judd, you probably know this as well. That the ensigns of the tribes, that the tribe of Dan's ensign was a serpent, and they didn't want a serpent, so they sort of changed it to an eagle or a phoenix or something like that.
Well, what's really interesting, I'm just trying to pull up another picture here just to share. So what I'm pulling up here is called the mushhushu, and the mushhushu is, as you can see here, it's the same thing. It's the same basic creature that I've been showing you guys. Okay. So you can see the eagle talons at the bottom, right? You got of course the wings, right? But this is a little bit more lion-esque than horse, okay? And this is also known as the Anzu bird, all right? So the Anzu bird and the Mushushu. These are known as the dragon. So in ancient Sumerian, this is called the Ushumgalu or Ushumgal, which means the great dragon. Okay. And it's like, oh, okay. And again, there's just a repeat of this motif all over the ancient Near East. And when we get to the land of Bashan, right? Habashan means it's from Bashmu, the snake dragon or dragon snake, right? So when we look at these particular creatures, it's called a dragon, but really what it is it's a hybridized creature, right? I mean, you got a lion, you got horse, you got a scorpion, you got eagles features, right? That's a hybrid, right? That's a chimera, right? They're the exact same thing.
You also have this, and I know your research, Doug, has been more in Sumerian and Mesopotamia and the ancient biblical world, but you have similar types of creatures in the Americas with the ancient, Native Americans.
The Quetzalcoatl, right? The plumed serpent.
Yes.
Right?
I think it was called America, and that's actually where we got our name from. I've studied that. It's been a while since I did it. And then you've got a similar type of creature as to what you just put up in China. So this is not just, just like Israel got scattered to the four corners of the earth, this false faith, this religion of Babylon, this what you're looking at on the screen right now, this also got scattered everywhere. You see the Egyptian pyramids, you see the pyramids for the Mayans and the Incas and in the Americas. So there's been the truth and the counterfeit to the truth going all the way back to Babylon. And that's why I like to say all roads just make a pit stop in Rome. So
that's very
just
true.
1 second. This is the Bashmu, which is in Hebrew it's Bashan. Okay. And I don't think I have it available, but there's a geoglyph just a couple stones throw, if you can have a good arm, from Gilgal Rephaim. You will find a geoglyph, a giant etching in the ground, kind of like the Nazca lions. It's the same idea. You'll find them.
Yeah, the serpent mount.
Yeah, but in Israel, right? And so the whole area was called the land of the dragon snakes or the snake dragons, right? And Og of Bashan, right? This was his stomping ground. And especially if you look at letter C, that really appears very, very close to what we find in the ground there in Israel. So I'm agreeing with you that what we find there in the form of the cherub or the seraphim, right, that they have the four different faces, but when we actually see those in the world, it has this form of a hybridized creature called a dragon.
Agreed. Yeah. Doug, I don't know if you knew this, but Doug Van Doren and I are writing a paper right now on the Serpent Mound of Bashan, and you no doubt have run across this too. But this being the English transliteration, but Bashan, BTN, is the same as the Hebrew LTN, which is Leviathan. And there again, you've got another. In this case, you've got the Chaos Dragon. So it's that same sort of serpentine dragon imagery associated with that entire region.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting. I just pulled it up here, so I think everyone can see that. Yeah. So right here is the head, right? So you can see the two eyes. I mean, hello, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So you can see the two eyes, and then you got the whole body right here, right? And this is just, like I said, a couple stones throw away from Gilgal Rephaim. So this is the Nephilim or Rephaim circle, as it were. And then you got this huge geoglyph. I mean, what's up with that, right? Where did this thing come from? And it looks so similar to the Bashmu or the Bashan, right? So it's not just coincidence. But I hadn't thought of Leviathan, right, as Bashan. That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't
it? About that one. That's very interesting. Wow. Man, I don't have to deal with that. That's pretty
Well,
amazing.
if audience participation means anything, Doug Woodward, you are winning. The demons are not the same as fallen angels.
Well, I don't go into the language the way that Hamp is because I'm not trained that way. But I just, it's from my reading, and I know Doug. This is Doug Hamp. This is your position because I've read your books, and I have read lots of other books. My feedback.
He's really smart.
Well, I read a lot of books. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to write the books I write.
I'm
But
teasing you.
I know you are. I know you. I'll try to be good natured. That's not easy for me. I have a sin nature, so it's hard. I'm just not. I'm not familiar with too many people that take that same point of view. Let's put it that way. So, anyway, so that's why it's not my research as much as it's. I got 8 guys over here saying one thing, and you're over there on the other side saying what you're saying, and so I'm just kind of like, well, that's just there's in the sort of the family of teachers that we're sort of in, although you may be in a different one than I'm in. That's not the common view. Let's put it that way.
I know that. Mine is the minority view, but that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, you have the language, skill that I don't have, and that probably a lot of the other people I read don't have either.
Sometimes things they just keep getting. They quote the same thing, and
we got a little scholastic battle going on.
It's okay. We'll leave it.
Dr. Judd, what's your opinion on
just not as smart
demons and fallen angels?
We don't have to resolve this. I'm okay with it. I don't mind. We can have some tension.
You know what? It's like when you're in a war or you're in a battle or something, you're not concerned with the ranks of your enemy, whether you're shooting at a private or a general. You just know that they're shooting back at you. So it's kind of like that, we can split hairs all we want to, but at the end of the day, we're all looking through a glass darkly at this stuff. What we can all agree on is that these are fallen entities that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
That's so true.
They're not nice things.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoever they got here, they're bad.
They're bad.
That is a
question from Matt24. Do you think there is leftover Nephilim genes that are still influencing the hybrid theories and the satanic seed theories and the Black Awakening, etc.?
Personally, I don't see how there could be Nephilim genetics because of the flood, but certainly post-flood, if these giant tribes are the result of second or multiple incursions of fallen angels, then some of those bloodlines could be remnant, because they did intermarry with human populations. We know that. But see, tracking down the details of that, actually tracking down the genetics, much less the genealogy, is nigh impossible.
Right.
And I'm assuming you're familiar, Dr. Burton, with Dr. Hamp. I'm gonna call y'all both doctors now. With your with his theory or understanding that Nimrod became a Nephilim, like through genetics, if you will, through the entities teaching him their dark arts of how to become a demigod. And back to Greek mythology, the demigods, if you will, are the that had all these human emotions, but these supernatural powers, sort of like, I don't know, modern day X-Men or modern day Marvel comics, et cetera, et cetera. So you got a similar understanding on that, Dr. Burton?
Yeah, I mean, if those genetics are still around, whether they're still around by virtue of interbreeding, or somehow we've re-accessed that, what I and others call watcher tech, are able to do that now. Again, that's hard to quantify for me, because it's not as if you can. I mean, if those bloodlines are around, then the remnants of those bloodlines look completely human. And that may be the case, but I'm always very cautious about tracing some of these bloodlines all the way back to antiquity, because we just don't have, in virtually all cases, we just don't have very accurate records to be able to do that. But that is not me saying that they don't exist. Certainly, the cultural residue of the sort of social and cultural engineering that the Watchers and the Giants were responsible for in human culture. Certainly, we live with that to this day. I've been writing about that really for the last couple of years in particular.
Well, and I won't say names, but I had an adult person, very intelligent person, that she went down the Q train road, and now she is, by golly, 100%. They're reptiles, they're reptilians. I mean, she went off on the Icky or the Ike. I call it the Ike.
Icky's a good way to pronounce his name, I think.
But I mean, she is like, she bought it hook, line, and sinker, and now I like it when she's around. I won't say names because I'm not the weirdest person around at that point. I'm not.
There you go.
Close second, though. Just joking. Oh, man. Well, we're out of time. I'm sorry to say. This has really been fun. Dr. Burton, I want to have you back. I did put in the chat where people can get your stuff. But is anthrojudd.tripod.com, is that the best website, or is there another website?
That's like that's the temporary one right now for Burton Beyond. I've got a guy that's revamping the websites. I actually have an intern now, thankfully.
Nice.
And you can still go to tioba.org to look at the Institute of Biblical Anthropology stuff. But those websites are almost ready to launch. In fact, I just talked to my guy today. They're almost ready to launch.
Nice. And tell us, where can people get your books?
They can get them at lulu.com. I've got a bookstore there. I'm in the process of transferring my stuff over to Amazon, so it won't be too much longer where they can get it there. People can email me at professorburton@yahoo.com if they're interested in taking coursework. And I'm on social media, so you can find me there too.
Nice. Well, it's really been a pleasure having you. This is so much fun. I mean, there's just more and more to talk about because we are seeing some weird stuff in our days, and
we didn't even get into the elongated skulls. That's one of my favorite weird things.
Yeah. Well, we can always revisit this topic. So that's the fun part. So just want to give a big shout out to everybody for joining us. Thank you for being part of the Prophecy Roundtable. We do our best to get to your comments. Can't get to all of them, unfortunately, but we do try, and hope that you'll join us. Now, next week, we're going to be celebrating the Feast of Sukkot, and it's really difficult to have a show from a campground. So we're not going to have it next week, but we will pick up after that. So I hope that everyone has a fantastic Sukkot. Now, if you've never celebrated Sukkot, you can do it really easy. You can just do something, even just maybe take a couple sheets or something and make a makeshift tabernacle. Okay, it's kind of fun. Just try it. Just, do a little Googling and see just kind of really super makeshift things. Some people make it on their patio. They'll make it in their basement, or they make it on a boat. They can make it pretty much anywhere. If you have a little more time, you can do something a little bit more elaborate, but you really don't have to. So the main point is just to sit in it, right? And you can interpret sitting like sitting or dwelling, okay? So you can take it as kind of lightly if you want, or a little bit more robustly. And but it's a time to remember what God did, that he dwelt with Israel in the wilderness. And it's a time to remember that Yeshua tabernacled among us. That's kind of cool. And it's a time to remember and to look forward to the fact that we are going to dwell with him, and he's going to dwell with us. That's the really cool part in the age to come. So I hope everybody has a chance to celebrate that. It's a great time. So thank you, everyone.